Welcome back everyone. Today, we're continuing with the next part of this series, called What If Goku Remembered the Saiyans? My name is Ash. Please, for me, drop a like and subscribe to the page. Also leave your comments down below. With that, let's begin. Let's take this up a notch, Tien growled, steadying himself as his body radiated with a pulsing red glow. Sweat trickled down his brow, but he pushed down his fear, the thrill of battle igniting a fire within him. I really hope this doesn't kill me, he thought as he braced himself. Kaioken, X3, he roared, and his aura exploded outward, doubling in intensity. The ground trembled as his power soared past Captain Ginyu's. Without wasting a second, Tien charged forward, his speed nearly blinding. With a fierce cry, he drove his knee into Ginyu's stomach, forcing a strangled gasp from the purple-skinned warrior as he doubled over, clutching his midsection. But Tien didn't let up. He twisted his body, bringing his fist around in a powerful arc, aimed right for Ginyu's temple. Ginyu's eyes widened in shock, but he managed to raise his arm in the last possible instant, intercepting the crushing blow. His body wavered, and he gritted his teeth, feeling the raw power behind Tien's attack. But Tien was relentless. He launched another punch, his movements a blur. Just as his fist was about to land, Tien felt the strain of the Kaioken technique gnawing at his body. The red aura around him flickered, then faded, and his power plummeted. Seizing the opening, Ginyu's lips twisted into a malicious grin. He easily deflected Tien's punch and retaliated, his fist crashing into Tien's face with a resounding impact. Tien's body was hurled backward, slamming into the ground with a brutal force. Blood trickled from his mouth as he struggled to get back up. "I'm through playing with you," Ginyu sneered, his eyes narrowing as he focused his energy. Pink light gathered in his hands, swirling and crackling with deadly power. He raised his hands, pointing them directly at Tien. "Milky Cannon!" he shouted, unleashing a spiraling wave of energy that roared toward the fallen warrior. Tien looked up, dazed, his body battered and bruised. His limbs felt like lead, and he knew he didn't have the strength to block the incoming attack. A sense of bitter resignation washed over him as he whispered, "I failed." But just before the energy wave could hit him, a tall, imposing figure appeared, stepping directly between Tien and the oncoming blast. Tien's eyes widened as he took in the sight of Saiyan armor, dark as night, and a cascade of long, wild black hair, framing a stern, chiseled face. Tien couldn't believe it. It was Raditz. He had never been so relieved to see the cold-hearted Saiyan, a warrior he'd once viewed with nothing but contempt. Despite their past, Tien knew Raditz had changed since that first brutal day he set foot on Earth. Raditz didn't even flinch as the blast hurtled toward him. With a casual swipe of his hand, he deflected the Milky Cannon to the side, sending it spiraling into the distance where it erupted harmlessly in a cloud of dust. He glanced over his shoulder at Tien, his expression calm yet fierce. Raditz reached into a small pouch at his waist and pulled out a sensu bean, holding it out to Tien. "You look like you could use this," he said in his low, gruff voice, handing Tien the bean. Tien accepted the bean with a shaky nod, chewing it quickly. Instantly, his injuries healed, and his energy surged back, his body feeling lighter and stronger. He sat up, watching as Raditz strode confidently toward Bardock and Krillin, offering each of them a sensu bean as well. Bardock accepted with a quiet nod of appreciation, while Krillin managed a weak grin, relief evident in his eyes. Turning back to Captain Ginyu, Raditz's gaze sharpened, his face settling into a look of grim determination. "Your fight is with me now," he declared, his voice steady and commanding. He turned his head slightly toward Tien, Krillin, and Bardock, his eyes narrowed in warning. "The others will stay out of this. Is that understood?" Ginyu's grin only widened, his gaze flickering with a savage delight. "Fine by me," he taunted, rolling his shoulders as he cracked his knuckles. "I could use a punching bag." Vegeta lay sprawled on the rocky ground, his breaths ragged, his body beaten and bruised. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, staining his armor and pooling onto the cracked dirt beneath him. But despite the agony tearing through his body, the relentless torment wasn't over. Frieza loomed over him, grinning with sadistic pleasure, clearly savoring every second of the sane prince's pain. He wasn't trying to kill Vegeta. Not yet. No, Frieza wanted him to suffer. "Is this really all you've got, Prince?" Frieza taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. He raised a foot and with calculated cruelty, drove it into Vegeta's stomach, sending a fresh wave of pain through him. Vegeta clenched his jaw, refusing to give Frieza the satisfaction of hearing him scream, but his vision blurred from the intensity of it. Frieza only laughed harder, relishing the look of agony etched on Vegeta's face. Suddenly, a high-pitched beep echoed from Frieza's scouter. He frowned, tapping the device as it registered a massive power level approaching fast. Now, who could that be? He muttered, annoyance flashing across his face. Before he could ponder further, a figure landed on the battlefield with a thud, sending a shockwave rippling across the rocky terrain. Frieza's eyes narrowed as he took in the newcomer, a tall, muscular Saiyan with fierce black eyes and wild hair. He wore a green gi over a black undershirt, his stance steady, and his gaze locked onto the tyrant. "You must be Frieza," Kakarot said, his voice calm but edged with unmistakable intensity. Frieza tilted his head, unimpressed. "And you are," he sneered. "Kakarot," the Saiyan replied, walking past Frieza without breaking eye contact and kneeling beside the fallen prince. Carefully, he pulled out a sensu bean, the last one he had, and pressed it gently into Vegeta's mouth. "You'll need this," he murmured. Vegeta's eyes fluttered open as the bean took effect. His injuries mended in an instant, strength and vitality flooding back into his body. He staggered to his feet, feeling his power surge back to full force. He glanced at Kakarot, a mixture of surprise and gratitude flashing across his features, though he quickly masked it. "Thanks," he muttered, swallowing his pride. Kakarot "Stay out of this fight," he said firmly, his gaze hardening. "He's mine." Vegeta chuckled, the ghost of a smirk playing at his lips. "You can have him," he replied, his tone dry. "I've got better things to do than die today." And with that, he backed away, keeping a wary eye on Frieza before slipping quietly toward the shadows. Frieza watched the two Saiyans with a puzzled look, his eyes narrowing as he tried to comprehend the scene. He hadn't missed Vegeta's miraculous recovery, but he could deal with that later. For now, he turned his attention back to Kakarot, amusement flickering in his eyes. "So you're the one who slaughtered my soldiers?" he asked with a cold laugh. "I think I'll take great pleasure in killing you for that." Kakarot's face remained impassive, but a dark fire smoldered in his eyes. "You destroyed my home, my people," he replied, his voice low and steady. "I'm here to end you for that." As the two prepared to clash, Vegeta slipped away, making his way through the debris and shattered rocks toward Frieza's towering spaceship. "Now, where are those Dragon Balls?" he thought, his mind racing. "If Kakarot keeps Frieza busy long enough, I might just get my wish." His lips curled into a determined grin as he moved silently through the entrance, adrenaline coursing through him. Inside the ship, the dim corridors were eerily silent, illuminated only by the cold, artificial lights lining the walls. Vegeta's footsteps echoed as he made his way deeper into Frieza's domain, heading toward the throne room. "The Dragon Balls are bound to be in there," he thought, anticipation building with every step. Suddenly, a voice cut through the silence. "Where do you think you're going?" Vegeta turned to find a henchman blocking his path, his blaster aimed directly at the Saiyan prince's chest. The soldier's face was twisted with arrogance, clearly relishing what he thought would be an easy capture. But Vegeta's expression was one of utter disdain. "That's none of your concern," Vegeta replied coldly, raising his hand. Without even sparing the henchman a second thought, he unleashed a small but precise energy blast. The beam tore through the henchman's armor, obliterating him instantly. His weapon clattered to the floor, and Vegeta stepped over it without a backward glance. Minutes later, Vegeta finally reached Frieza's private chambers. The large metal doors slid open with a hiss, revealing the throne room. There, glinting in the dim light, was his prize, the Dragon Balls, each one glowing with a golden hue, waiting for someone worthy to make their wish. A satisfied smirk spread across Vegeta's face as he stepped into the room, his eyes fixed on the orbs. Frieza crouched low, his tail flicking behind him as he observed the Saiyan warrior standing before him. This one was different from Vegeta. He could feel it. Something about the way Kakarot held himself hinted at a confidence and control that Vegeta lacked. Interesting, Frieza thought, his eyes narrowing. Though his scouter registered Kakarot's power at only 250,000, he had a strange feeling this fight wouldn't be as easy as the one with the beaten prince. His musings were cut short as Kakarot launched forward, aiming a fierce kick at Frieza's head. Frieza moved almost lazily. raising his arm to block the kick with a smirk. He retaliated instantly, shooting a fist toward Kakarot's exposed leg, but Kakarot anticipated the move, flipping back with a quickness that took Frieza by surprise. Oh? Frieza's smirk widened. Impressive. You've managed to avoid death for a few extra seconds. Kakarot's eyes gleamed, and he straightened, an intense red aura flaring around him. His power doubled, the ground trembling under the weight of his energy. I'm just getting started, he said, his voice calm but charged with determination. Frieza's scouter beeped wildly, the numbers climbing. Ah, stronger than I thought, he mused, a hint of amusement in his tone. It seems I might need to use both hands to finish you. Kakarot's gaze hardened. You're going to need a lot more than that, he shouted, charging forward again. With a burst of speed, he aimed the same kick toward Frieza's head. But this time, Frieza ducked, countering with a brutal punch to Kakarot's midsection, only to feel his fist connect with nothing but air. A blur of motion revealed Kakarot behind him, already swinging a powerful fist at the back of Frieza's head. Frieza whipped around just in time, raising his arm to block. Meanwhile, Captain Ginyu charged at Raditz, his fist poised for a direct hit to the Saiyans' face. But Raditz barely moved, simply shifting his head a few inches to the side as Ginyu's fist flew past. The purple-skinned captain snarled, frustration mounting, as he threw a rapid series of punches and kicks, each aimed to break through Raditz's calm defense. Yet somehow, Raditz seemed to dodge each attack with effortless grace, barely even bothering to block. Why can't I hit you? Ginyu bellowed in frustration, pouring his energy into a final desperate punch aimed at Raditz's stomach. But once again, he struck nothing but an afterimage. In a flash, Raditz appeared behind him, delivering a swift kick to Ginyu's lower back that sent the captain reeling forward. Because you're weak, Raditz stated flatly, his voice calm as he floated back down to the ground. He turned his gaze to Bardock, Tien, and Krillin, who were watching the battle with tense anticipation. I've got this fool under control. You three need to get the Dragon Balls. Bardock nodded, his expression resolute. Right, let's head back to Guru's and grab the radar. With a final glance toward Raditz, Bardock, Tien, and Krillin took off, flying at full speed toward Guru's house, their mission clear. Raditz shifted his attention back to Ginyu, who was struggling to regain his balance, clutching his stomach and glaring at the Saiyan. I'm going to give you one chance, Raditz said, his voice as cold as steel. Surrender now, and I won't make this hurt any more than it already does. Ginyu let out a bitter laugh, straightening up, despite the pain that radiated through his torso. I don't think so, he spat, lunging forward in a renewed attack. But before he could even throw a punch, Raditz's fist shot out like a bullet, burying deep into Ginyu's stomach. The impact doubled the purple warrior over, and he stumbled back, clutching his abdomen, his face twisted in pain. How? Ginyu stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Raditz chuckled, folding his arms across his chest as he looked down at his struggling opponent. I've done some training since you last saw me, he replied, a smirk playing on his lips. Turns out my little brother has some pretty incredible techniques. Ginyu grinned wickedly, feeling the stirring of a dangerous plan within him. He still had one final trick left, a move he only used in desperate situations. With a low chuckle, he clenched his fist, charging it with energy. Then, without hesitation, drove it into his own chest. Pain surged through him, but he held steady, gathering his life force for his signature move. His eyes locked onto Raditz, and he shouted, "Change now!" A purple beam of energy shot from his body, striking Raditz head on. Blinding light and swirling energy erupted between them, obscuring both warriors from view. When the light finally faded, Raditz blinked, his mind swimming with confusion. Across from him, he saw himself. He glanced down, a sickening feeling flooding through him. His hands were purple, his fingers tipped with claws. A deep wound gaped in his chest, oozing blood. No, what's going on? Raditz muttered, horrified, his voice now carrying Ginyu's gravelly tone. A sinister laugh echoed across the battlefield as Ginyu, now in Raditz's body, stretched his limbs, testing his new strength. You fool, he sneered. You didn't know I could switch bodies? It's how I always come out on top. Whenever someone stronger appears, I just take what's theirs. He sprang forward, driving his knee into Raditz's stomach with brutal force. Raditz, now trapped in Ginyu's battered body, choked, his knees buckling from the power of his own former strength. Ginyu smirked, flexing his new arms as he felt the energy coursing through them. Yes, I think I'll enjoy this body. I may not be able to fight at full power just yet, but it won't take long to adjust. He glanced toward the horizon, where Bardock, Tien, and Krillin had flown off. And now, to deal with your little friends, he said, launching into the air with his newly acquired power, a cruel glint in his eyes. Meanwhile, Kakarot and Frieza's fierce battle continued. Kakarot threw a hard punch at Frieza's face, but the tyrant tilted his head just in time, dodging the blow with ease. He retaliated immediately, aiming a vicious strike at Kakarot's midsection, hoping to catch him off guard, but Kakarot was faster. He sprang upward, avoiding Frieza's attack, and took the battle to the sky. Frieza followed in an instant, a smirk on his lips. With a flick of his wrist, he formed a small, crackling ball of energy and hurled it toward the Saiyan warrior. Kakarot paused mid-air, spotting the oncoming attack, and with a focused swing of his arm, batted the blast away effortlessly. He then tucked in, diving straight down toward Frieza at full speed, determination burning in his eyes. Frieza saw him coming and threw a punch aimed directly at Kakarot's face, but his fist met only air. Kakarot had vanished in a blur, leaving an afterimage behind. Frieza's eyes darted around, trying to locate him, and then he spotted Kakarot below, standing calmly on the ground, his hands cupped at his side. Without hesitation, Kakarot focused his energy, his voice ringing out powerfully. Kamehameha! A fierce blue beam of energy erupted from his hands, roaring toward Frieza like a tidal wave. Frieza reacted quickly, raising his hands to block the attack, but he was stunned by the sheer force of it. The blast pushed him higher into the air, its relentless energy threatening to overwhelm him. Gritting his teeth, Frieza forced himself free from the blast and landed some distance away, breathing hard. He wiped a thin trail of blood from his mouth, staring down at the Saiyan with a look of newfound respect. I must say, I'm impressed, he admitted, his tone laced with grudging admiration. Few warriors have managed to keep up with me. Kakarot's eyes flashed, his expression unyielding. I'm only getting started, he replied. In an instant, Kakarot's aura intensified, blazing brighter than before as he rocketed forward, moving with a speed that left Frieza reeling. Before the tyrant could react, Kakarot's fist connected with Frieza's stomach, landing with such power that it drove the air from Frieza's lungs and sent a spray of blood and spit from his mouth. Frieza staggered, eyes wide with shock. Kakarot didn't let up, his movements smooth and unrelenting. He spun, his legs swinging around in a powerful arc, his foot colliding with Frieza's temple. The impact sent Frieza hurtling across the grassy battlefield, his body skidding over the ground as he struggled to regain control. Frieza rose slowly, brushing the dust from his shoulder and wiping a trickle of blood from his chin with one clawed finger. His eyes narrowed, studying Kakarot with a hint of something that almost resembled respect, or perhaps just dark amusement. Well, well, it seems you're stronger than you let on, Frieza drawled. Not a single fighter besides my father has ever managed to make me bleed. You've earned a small bit of my respect. Kakarot tilted his head, a half smile on his face. I do what I can, he said, his tone casual, but his eyes remained sharp, ready for whatever Frieza would throw at him next. Frieza chuckled, the sound dark and menacing. Enjoy your little victory while it lasts, because you are still no match for my true power. He glanced at Kakarot, as if expecting fear. I'm sure you fought Zarban by now, he continued, waving a hand dismissively. You know, he isn't the only one who can transform. With a cold smirk, Frieza clenched his fists at his sides, and his energy began to surge. It radiated outward in waves, cracking the ground beneath him and causing the air itself to vibrate. His scouter began beeping erratically as his power spiked, and cracks formed in his sleek armor. As his muscles grew, his entire body expanded, transforming from his usual slender form to a towering figure nearly 7 feet tall, his muscles bulging grotesquely, his horns extended upward, curving with deadly sharpness. When he finally straightened, Frieza's new form loomed over Kakarot, casting a menacing shadow. You should know, he hissed, his voice deeper, dripping with malice, that my power level in this form exceeds 1 million. Not far from the battlefield, Vegeta soared through the sky, a smirk plastered across his face. Behind him, the Dragon Balls floated, suspended in the air by his newfound ability to manipulate objects with his mind. The telekinesis had been tricky to master, But after a few minutes of focus, he was maneuvering the massive orbs with ease. And sneaking past Frieza, that had been almost too easy. The tyrant was completely absorbed in his fight with Kakarot. Vegeta let out a small laugh, boosting his speed, as he sensed the faint, distant power of Kakarot's brat and the other Earthlings. No doubt they had at least one Dragon Ball with them. Soon, immortality will be mine, he muttered, his grin widening. With all 7 Dragon Balls, his wish was just within reach. Elsewhere, Bardock, Krillin, and Tien landed outside Guru's house. As they touched down, Krillin turned to the Saiyan warrior with a questioning look. "So, are you ever going to tell me how you two got so strong so fast?" he asked, shaking his head in wonder. "It's not like you had time to train enough to reach these levels. Not that I'm complaining. The help against the Ginyu force was definitely appreciated." Bardock chuckled, crossing his arms. "It wasn't training," he explained. "Guru unlocked our hidden power. I'm sure he can do the same for you." The 3 stepped inside, where Denda, Bulma, and Naeyeon sat with the towering Namekian elder. As they entered, Bulma looked up, her eyes lighting up with relief. "You're back," she exclaimed, running over to Bardock and pulling him into a tight hug. "I was worried sick about you." "I'm fine, Mom," Bardock reassured her, though his tattered clothes and scuffed armor told a different story. Bulma raised an eyebrow, placing her hands on her hips and giving him a skeptical look. "Really?" she said, clearly unconvinced. Bardock rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. Okay, there was a little trouble, but Uncle Raditz showed up and took care of it. "We don't have time to waste," Tien interjected, steering the conversation back to the task at hand. "We need to gather the remaining Dragon Balls and use them to bring everyone back." Bulma's face grew serious as she glanced down at the Dragon Radar in her hand. "It's not going to be that easy," she warned. "From what I've pieced together, Frieza has already gathered 5 of the Dragon Balls, and they're back at his ship." "I can feel my dad's power out there fighting him," Bardock added, his expression hardening. "That should keep Frieza distracted for a while." Bulma nodded thoughtfully, studying the radar. "Then we might have a chance to get the other 5. Her voice trailed off as her eyes widened. "Wait a minute, they're heading this way," she said, watching as the 5 dots on the radar started moving closer. Bardock's brow furrowed as he focused, his senses picking up on a familiar energy. "It's Vegeta," he said grimly, "and he's stronger than before." Krillin's face paled slightly. "He was on our side though, right?" Tien shook his head. "Vegeta only cares about one thing, eternal life. We can't let him get that wish." "You'll have to hold him off until we can make our wish then," Bulma said, her voice steady but her eyes tense. "Once we wish everyone back, the Dragon Balls will be inactive. Frieza won't be able to use them." "Excuse me," Dende interjected, raising his hand slightly. His voice was small but urgent. "Purunga, the Namekian dragon. He cannot bring back more than one person at a time." A heavy silence fell over the room. Bardock's face darkened. "What? But we have several friends we need to revive," he said, frustration edging into his voice. "And let's not forget all the Namekians Frieza's men have killed," Tien added, crossing his arms. "We can't leave them behind." Bulma took a deep breath, clearly thinking fast. "Then we'll wish Piccolo back first," she suggested, her tone firm. "Once he's alive, we can use Earth's Dragon Balls later to bring everyone else back. We just have to get started." "Assuming Piccolo doesn't get any ideas of his own," Tien muttered. "We've never exactly trusted him." Dende shook his head, raising a hand. "Purunga grants 3 wishes," he explained. "You could use one of your other wishes to bring Piccolo here, so he can't do anything on his own." Krillin's eyes widened in surprise. 3 wishes? He asked, glancing at the others. "We didn't know the Namekian dragon was that powerful." Out on the battlefield, Kakarot stood facing Frieza's transformed state. The tyrant's muscles bulged, his body twice its previous size, and packed with raw power that radiated out in visible waves. Kakarot could feel the intensity of Frieza's energy, nearly double what it had been before. And the changeling's new form was more monstrous, more intimidating than anything Kakarot had faced. Before he could fully grasp the enormity of this power, Frieza lunged at him, a giant fist swinging toward his jaw. The impact was brutal, sending Kakarot staggering back, his feet skidding across the rocky terrain. The force rattled his bones, and he could taste blood in his mouth as he wiped a thin trickle from his lip. Frieza's mouth twisted into a grin. "Impressive. Not many outside of my family can take a punch like that from me in this form." Kakarot's expression hardened, and he dropped into a fighting stance, his red aura flaring up around him as he allowed his power to rise to meet Frieza's. "I'm not afraid of you," he said, his voice unwavering. With a burst of speed, Kakarot shot forward, aiming a punch directly at Frieza's face. But the tyrant caught Kakarot's fist in his massive hand, holding him in place with surprising ease. Kakarot's eyes narrowed as he swung with his other fist, but Frieza snatched it mid-air too, locking both of Kakarot's fists in his crushing grip. The two warriors were locked in a fierce power struggle, muscles straining as they pressed against each other, each testing the other's strength. Kakarot's aura pulsed brighter, his feet digging into the ground as he pushed harder, but Frieza held firm, his grin widening. Back at Guru's house, Krillin stepped outside, his fists clenched in exhilaration as he punched at the air. He felt incredible, his power skyrocketing after Guru had unlocked his hidden strength. Every cell in his body seemed to hum with energy, a natural, steady force far beyond anything he'd reached before, even when he'd pushed himself with Kaioken. There was no strain this time, no burning in his muscles. This power was all his. Bardock joined him, watching Krillin with a knowing smile. "How does it feel?" he asked, his voice calm, but his eyes glinting with pride. Krillin looked over, his face breaking into a wide grin. "Amazing. I never realized I had this kind of power inside me." Bardock nodded. "I know the feeling." Krillin laughed. "Well, I bet you do. You're still stronger than me after all." "It's a sane thing," Bardock replied with a smirk. "We get stronger after every fight." Their conversation was cut short as Tien stepped outside, his eyes narrowing as he looked out toward the horizon. "Something's wrong," he murmured. "I can sense Raditz's power approaching, but something feels off." Bardock straightened, his face darkening as he too felt the strange energy closing in. "You're right, that doesn't feel like Uncle Raditz." The warriors tensed as a figure approached from the distance, landing just a few yards away from them. It was Raditz, or at least it looked like him, but something in his eyes was different, cold and sinister. Ginyu, now in Raditz's body, smirked, taking a fighting stance. "So, now that bothersome Saiyan is out of the way, I think I'll enjoy finishing off you three," he sneered, his voice dripping with malice.